Oh, you know what? Oops. All right, I don't know. I don't remember setting the privacy settings this time for some reason for just us, but now I can't find them. So, but I think I'll be able to change it afterwards.
Okay.
Not that I think people are going to be dying to tune into
Coming
the
in.
conversation or anything, but all right.
Hi,
Hi, Esty.
how are you?
I'm good. How
Good.
are you? Okay. Um, so let's see here. I created a little agenda here, and I also put it in our base camp, so you could also refer to it there if you wanted to. I feel like there's like so much to cover. I'll try to like kind of keep track of time on that we spend on each topic and keep us headed towards getting through all of them. But I thought it made sense maybe just to start with talking about Megan briefly. And
Okay.
I did hear from her this morning, you know, because SDU had written back the very generous response of sort of what is your preference? What do you want to do? Um, so I checked in with her, and I mean, her response was basically that she really would like to stay involved. She's just concerned about um, causing us to fall, slowing us down and causing us to fall behind since she doesn't have, um, her life is really in upheaval at the moment. And yeah, I mean, and I don't know if I had told you guys initially or if she had told you or whatever, but she's taking a leave of absence next year from St. Rose because they took away our sabbaticals. So
Okay.
she's sort of doing a self-funded sabbatical and moving to Vermont during that time, and a lot of chaos basically is the bottom line. So yeah, so she would like to stay involved on some level. Again, I think there's different ways that we could do that. You know, she could continue to take a chunk of the research, but she won't be able to sit down and do that until August. Or she could play more of a kind of editorial role, either specifically with the sort of audio and video stuff, with the interviews, or looking at the text as a whole, which also sort of feeds into the question of what we want that text to look like in terms of the multiple voices present. So all these things are kind of related too, because I do think we need to revisit timeline again for all of this, so that also relates to sort of where she's at. So thoughts from the two of you on those topics?
I think maybe my thoughts are a little bit contingent on some of the other points on the agenda in terms of the timeline and in terms of um, some of Estie's concerns and feedback about the multivocality and things. So I think actually those I might want to talk through first.
Come first,
What
yeah.
do you think about?
Do you agree? Okay, so let's, yeah. I was trying to figure out how to put this in some sort of order, and everything is contingent upon other
Sure,
things, so
sure.
it became very difficult. Um, yeah, so I mean, I guess Estie's question about sort of style and voice and the idea of sort of the, whether we want it to be this very explicit, um, multivocal text, or a more cohesive text that obviously references the idea that, of course, it is coming from multiple voices, uh, is is a huge one. And then that, my thing also is, how do we, and this also relates to the question of even utilizing terms, right? Having a kind of, creating our own kind of mini style guide for what word choice we're deciding upon. But all of these, of course, are contested issues in the field, and sort of what I want the book to be looking at. So, which is also why I chose to continue to record our sessions, because I think us wrangling with these conversations can become part of the text in some way. Whether it's like short transcripts or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I guess thinking also about, I think initially we were all kind of maybe thinking more sort of cohesive, unified voice. But I guess as I think more about it, and I think also about Estie's tenure and promotion concerns, and if I think about it even in relationship to the field, I think there's certainly a lot of arguments that can be made in favor of a sort of explicitly multi-vocal text that really kind of distinguishes sections. And even we could work that into design. I mean, so much of the sort of, even just looking at our base camp conversations, right? Or texting. I mean, so much of the work we do in online digital spaces is this kind of back and forth conversation amongst people where your writing is indicated by color or a little, your initials next to your name or your avatar or whatever the case may be. I think that's quite common and something that could potentially be worked into this text as well. I guess I go there thinking more about Esty in this. But I know, Jim, you had said a more unified voice, and I mean, I guess that's what I was. My original ideas were, we'll compose the text and continually through shared track changes and comments and edits create a more unified text. That's where I was going initially. But I don't know. I don't know if that's the best thing there. And I guess also this is, I have another question that sort of comes up in my thinking about all of this, and that was, I had gone back and forth when I was initially creating this project about really following the original book and doing a chronology. And then decided that, as I said, as I made the argument before, that what's transpired in these 20 years looks very different than what transpired in those initial 15 years, and is much less linear, and it does not lend itself to that kind of chronology. On the other hand, that is how I kind of divided up the work, because that was the only way I could kind of wrap my head around dividing up the work. And so I'm also open to revisiting the idea of maybe the text is more chronological. Maybe it's about creating disparate chunks of text that are identifiable to each of us contributing. So that's something else I've been thinking about as well. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there is a way to do this more as a chronology. Although I don't know. Thoughts?
Well, okay, so for me, when I got the email back from my chair of my TMP committee, there was a part of me that saw, well, the one thing that I don't like about this particular kind of, I feel like I'm in this weird bind because I don't like that I, as a tenure track faculty member, might have to decide on like really tracking every single thing that I do in this collaborative project. And it's like this project that I want to do here collaboratively, I think we should be able to work collaboratively around the way that we see our field, our discipline, how we see this project. And then all of a sudden I have these other external factors that I'm trying to wrap my head around because I'm so new at this. And I was thinking about it last night, and I was thinking, well, the solution for me is that I just have to track everything that I do. I'm just going to have to track. I mean, we already have Basecamp, which is great. And I'm just going to have to track every intellectual contribution that I make, and I'm going to have to track everything that I write. And then I'm going to have to ask you both for some kind of statement or letter, just, kind of like overviewing there are contributions on the project. And then I just said, okay, well, that's just what I have to do. And okay, that's just my reality. But I just wanted to also alert you to, both of you, kind of what I was facing, and that it just means for me, I'm going to have to do, I'm just going to have to track a lot more for me. And so that's just kind of where I sat. And then I started really thinking about, I have done now 14, I've read 14 articles. I have one more to read from CNC Print. And so I'm starting to see these threads emerge. And what I like about the univocal text is I can already see these threads that are emerging that are speaking back over a span of time, like the digital divide or assessment. And it would be so interesting to pull the themes from this like the 5-year period that I'm doing, and then be able to say, okay, well, the digital divide or even design issues, this is how it's been talked about over this span of time. So it doesn't become this chronological, like, sectioning off this conversation, because then what happens is every 5-year period we end up kind of rehashing the same conversation again instead of kind of tying it into this one big thread throughout like each chapter as it's designed. So it's already emerging for me, seeing these large themes and how that can be woven in there. So I'm not like advocating for one way or the other than just me saying, like, I have this external pressure, it looks like I'm just going to have to do more work, and I just wanted to tell you two about it. So that's where I sit.
Yeah, thanks, Esty. I think it was really smart of you to ask about this up front with your chair and get all that information from them, because you don't want to be surprised later on. So I really appreciate you. That was really smart on your behalf, and kind of letting us know the sort of what it will mean moving forward with the project. I think part of me wants to put on my Gail and Cindy hat and kind of say, like, what does this mean for you in terms of like the decisions you want to make about the project and how feasible, like, doing all the extra work is for you. Because on one hand it's understandable, on the other hand it's pretty disappointing. Like, to have to create that whole additional apparatus. So yeah, uh, um, I didn't,
But I guess, here's the other thing is, even if I create this whole apparatus, it becomes an experience that maybe one day after I'm tenured, I can write about in a very polite, acknowledging way that these are some of the things that tenure track faculty have to negotiate when they work on collaborative projects. So I don't know, in some ways, like, I see it as like extra labor a little bit on my part, just on my part, but I already track my time. I have a spreadsheet and we have Basecamp. And so now I'm just going to create my own little document where I track everything that I write and then all of my contributions. And then that's just what I'll do. And then maybe one day I'll revisit it. Maybe I won't, but it'll be something. I'm going to try to look at this in a positive way. So that's how I'm kind of focusing it right now. So maybe one day I'll write about it.
That's great. I love that you're already thinking about it in that context. Yeah, and I mean, it's definitely extra labor, and it's definitely unfortunate. And I mean, of course, I mean, I can't speak for Jim, although I think I can in this instance. Of course, we will sign off on whatever and write whatever we need to support you in this. That's just not a problem at all. So that, don't even think twice about that part. But yeah, and I mean, I think obviously it's wise for all of us to, to some extent keep track of our contributions, even if my institution isn't as, I don't even know what the word is to use, but precise. I mean, they also tend to be more skeptical still of digital work, and and as we talked about last time, right? It's all about creating the narrative, creating the argument. So I think that's smart for all of us, anyways. I guess also related to timeline, when are you up for tenure?
Oh, I've got a ways to go. I'm just entering my second year, but what's happened is with our new university president, the third-year reviews has been a period where people have been let go across multiple departments in the university. So not last year, but the year before. Out of the people that went up for tenure or third-year review, 30% of people were let go. And that was a significant increase from the previous president where it was less than 10%. So it was really unprecedented that at third-year review people were their contracts were being not renewed and being asked to leave the university. So there was really increased importance that I get my ducks in the row for my third-year review. Yeah.
That sounds like a very similar story that has happened after the shift in provost, but the same thing in third-year review has taken on. So I guess part of where I'm coming from with this is how comfortable are you with this, with your own tenure and promotion scenario? I mean, I guess again, like with the Galen Cindy hat, part of me would say I would totally understand if you said, I can't. This is too risky for me. I don't.
But there is that part that I'm aware of, and unfortunately, what happens, I think, within like our field is computers and writing specialists have to come in and actually have to educate their T&P committee about the kind of work that we do. Right. And I've already planted a seed. Like right now, my T&P department doesn't have guidelines for the kind of digital work that we do. But I've planted a seed about acknowledging that there should be maybe some inclusive language in there. And then I'm going to talk with my chair in my second year coming up about adding some stuff there to see if we can get people who will add. And luckily, I wasn't the only hire doing digital work. So I have two other people who are also doing digital work. So I think that will be okay. But the other part of it is I think this is also part of the risk of doing this kind of work. And I've been completely comfortable doing this kind of work throughout my entire graduate career. Now, like, I have high stakes for it, and now I feel like, yeah, I think I should really kind of continue the path that I want to go down and do this work because I think it's important. And if that means that I have to face certain realities later on down the line. Maybe that's my reality, but for right now, yeah, I'm sticking to the project. Yeah.
Thank you. That's tremendous. And like Jen said, I mean, obviously, we will support whatever you need in those terms. I mean, very yes, of course. Well, happy to do that. I think that the one tension that I do see a little bit is coming back to what Jen was talking about in terms of the larger organizational structure. It certainly is easier to be able to label the work, to divide up the work if the organizational structure of the book were chronological and we each had like a chapter on a time period. And you can point to and say, like, this is my time period, this is the work that I did. I think there's a lot to like about an organizational scheme that is set up like Jen has it set up, that doesn't do that. I think that it does make it a lot harder to identify sort of individual, because we're all going to be writing each chapter. So I think the reality is the organizational structure of not chronological makes pulling out, like, these are my words, these are Jen's words, these are Estee's words, harder, because we're going to have to do a lot of, I think, like, writing over each other, and sentences will not necessarily be like yours or mine or Jen's, but they may be like all of ours, and I don't know how you assign that at the end. So I mean, I just think that tension is going to be there if we stick with that organizational structure.
What if there was like a meeting in the middle? What if we kept the same like theme of all the chapters so that it's not chronological, but the chapter 1 is what is writing, chapter 2 is on the MOOCs, and then the chapter 3 is the digital humanities, and that we all like compiled kind of our research, I guess, in some way. We all took the chapter, so we would each have an individual chapter, and then maybe we collaboratively write a chapter together in that vein. I don't know. Is that too much? I don't know. I was just trying to think of like a meeting in the middle there.
Yeah, I mean, and I have too. I've been trying to think about ways that it can kind of be both and. I mean, I guess my initial reaction to well, and going back to what you were saying earlier, right, Esty, about sort of recognizing these threads, and you really want to be able to talk about it across the span of time, I mean, is exactly why I didn't think the text should be chronological. I mean, that's exactly where I was coming from and thinking about that. And thinking about dividing up the chapters again, and I hear, obviously, it's much easier to divide up the work that way. Obviously, as the person who created the chapters, or the ideas behind the chapters sort of initially, it's like I want to get in on all of those conversations. I want to grapple with all of those themes and questions and ideas. And so it would make me sad to like just have a chapter, even if we did like a collaboratively, like the intro collaboratively written, and then that final chapter collaboratively written, or something like that, and then divide up the chapters in between. I'm not totally opposed to that idea, but I'm also thinking about what I had written about as sort of a larger concern for me, that again I think sort of style we can even out through editing, in terms of sort of making it cohesive enough to be easily readable and accessible and all of that. My bigger concern is like what happens when we don't agree on the sort of claims being made about these various ideas and the language we use. And I mean, one of the things that I wrote on the agenda is like, so this overarching question that I began the project with, sort of, are we there yet? And the there being, well, like, where is that, and what does that even mean? But referencing this relationship between composition And, you know, this community that was historically kind of seen as marginalized and fringe, and where are we now sort of thing. And, you know, depending on who you talk to, you get a different idea of whether that even matters or what that relationship looks like now. And the 3 or 4 of us may not even agree on that. So this, I think, for me becomes the question of like where it gets really tricky, but I'm also like, can this somehow become the kind of medium, the kind of middle space, in that, you know, at moments where we disagree or see things slightly differently, can we kind of capitalize on that in the written text to show that all of this is still contested, right? So I don't know. So what that would look like exactly, right? So that we have a text that's collaboratively written, kind of primarily factual research based, right? Here are the trends, here are the keywords, here's what we learned about what was happening related to these topics over the span of 20 years. And kind of like we have outtakes from our different interviewees weighing in on these topics. Maybe we have transcripts of us going back and forth, or we each write a chunk of text that becomes our sort of voice on that. Which all sounds very complicated, but I think maybe.
No, I can see that. I can visualize that. There's so I did this very small book review with Chris Blair and Mariana Grohowski and Kairos called Gendered Labor. And we did each a narrative that corresponded to some portion of the text about our relationship with like gender and technology. And so while I was talking about in like this kind of in this one book review about kind of like the labor that women have to go through when they want to position themselves as authority with any kind of technology, and then kind of like the inspiration that occurs when women are able to assume certain roles, my narrative then corresponded to me saying, I'm just exhausted. I'm just exhausted about all of this. It really is exhausting. And so, you know, in that way, I could see that we have this textual element, and then in those moments where we have that tension, we could have some kind of like video or just even like a simple audio clip that would link off to the side of the text where one of us kind of pops up and says, here are our thoughts about this, and here's why we think this way. Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense to me. You know, I think, and I think there will become sort of natural like points in the text where that, you know, where we kind of know that needs to happen. Do you know what I mean? You know, and that even goes back to, you know, your sort of idea or question in the intro, like, you know, how closely are we going to mirror the intro? And they really situate themselves as people, as, you know, as humans, as scholars in this field. And that's, in my original proposal, that's what I had proposed for that intro chapter. And then I actually stripped away some of that because I wasn't sure, because it was about me, I wasn't sure what it was going to look like now with other people. But again, that can be a section of the text where we could have, you know, where it becomes just completely multivocal. Here's Estee's story, here's Jim's story, here's Jen's story, here's Megan's story or whatever, and, you know, that's made clear. So I think there is a way for it to be both and without us dividing up the chapters, but it probably is, as Jim's pointing out, the most complex route we could possibly take, in case we haven't already made it as complex as possible.
Yes, and I didn't mean that to seem an argument for reorganizing it chronologically, but I do think we just have to acknowledge that, yes, it's I think it is the most complex route, and that might be a reason why it's the best route. But I just I hate to make Estie's job harder in kind of like tracking, and I think that is going to do that a little bit, um, because it's. I mean, part of the argument I've made in my own arguments about like pieces, collaborative work, is that I can't strip out the the contributions that individually because it gets to be so communally kind of deliberated and generated and owned. Um, so I just think I just if we know that I on one hand like I feel really bad making this so much harder for SD to have to do because I can just imagine like having to do that for myself and like that's totally nervous breakdown territory. Um, but on the other hand, I think we can make a very compelling argument why that's the way we've organized the book. And I think for all the reasons that Jen said, that's a really good reason, and there are opportunities to recognize the multivocality. But I do think there's a tension there that I just want, us to be aware of, I guess.
I think for me, like as I'm like sitting with this, what I'm just going to do is in like my document, I'll put all my original words, and then when I have to like put this in like my documentation, then I can have like another document to show like here's an overlay or an overlay in a sense of here's how it has changed with collaboration and with editing and with revision, and this is part of the overall argument about like a univocal text and with collaboration and how messy it is. And then, I'm just going to have to run with that and see what happens. I mean, and maybe that's just the risk that I take for this project, and I see where I end up at the end. But I'm committed to this project, so I'm not going to. I guess it's kind of bad advice. I'm probably like saying to myself, I'm not going to let TMP in some way dictate what projects I do and don't do. I probably shouldn't say that, but I just really, this is a project that I've wanted to do. I've thought about for a long time. I was so excited to be part of it. So um, maybe it's just a little bit more messy and more work for me, but I can't imagine not doing the work. So, I have in my mind like ways that I can work through it, and then at the end of the day, I can just submit what I have and just say, here you go, and then we'll see what happens. The other thing though is so my second year review is actually on September 15th. So I will be asking, if you all don't mind, for some kind of statement about just kind of like our early kind of like work on this project and like kind of like what I've done thus far. And I can kind of catalog everything for you too. And that way I can just slip it into my file and have that there. Because I also have to do this other kind of documentation. Anytime there's a book project, I have to do all kinds of other paperwork. So I'll be asking for that. But otherwise, I'm okay.
Okay, so I guess from there, yeah, maybe we can work backward on the questions of timeline and Megan's role, and then I have some other, we've touched on all of the other things on there, but I want to make sure I'm clear on what our responses are to them. But maybe we can just kind of knock off timeline and Megan's, not knock off Megan, but take that off of the agenda. So I think, yeah, and I don't know why I had in my head that it was one chapter and not two for the prospectus for CCTP, but I did, and I even went back and looked and had emails from Cindy and Gail talking about what I was going to submit, and it was the intro and another chapter. So I don't know how I blocked all of that out, but I had a baby, so that's all I can say. It's my only defense. So I do think we need to um, kind of revise timeline again, and particularly if we want to kind of wait for Megan to catch up or not, or again, have that be a slightly different role. But I mean, yeah, I guess I'm curious, what for each of you seems realistic. In the meantime, I can touch base with Cindy and Gail and kind of give them an update. Um, it's taken a while to kind of, just managing the kind of the structure and how things are working with four of us. It has taken up a bunch of time, so I can explain that to them. I mean, I'm thinking, and I know I've been getting slowed down with a bunch of staffing issues that we're having here institutionally, and just a bunch of kind of institutional messiness that's been taking up a lot of my time. And also, I think my role as WPA is going to take up a lot more time in the coming semester based on the staffing issues we're having. So it's not like I'm just going to be done with it, sort of thing. So I definitely think we need to kind of reassess that. I mean, what do the two of you think seems reasonable on your end?
I'm gonna have to think about this for a moment. I just need a moment to kind of do some calculations in my head.
Jim, what do you think?
Yeah, I guess I wonder what the pressures are for either of you to move quickly. I mean, I'm in a different kind of position where, my next hurdle is like trying to get full professor. So my timeline is not it's not quite as, I guess, as critical as like Estes is, or I don't know how that plays in for you too, Jen. But um, so my thinking about the scope of the project is to kind of like slow down quite a bit and think about um, maybe the end of the semester as what to look at for the timeline for this. But I recognize too that you might have needs to kind of move forward more quickly than that. But I totally sympathize with the WPA issues kind of jumping in. And I know when we start our semesters, we're all going to have things come in that, make us kind of not have the time we'd like to devote on things for certain chunks. And I think, that's okay if we kind of take the long, there are going to be certain times when folks can devote more effort and space and certain times when they can't. But I want to respect what the needs are that you have to meet a certain, like it would be fine for me to say the prospectus at the end of December. But I don't know if that seems just inappropriately far away for you two.
It doesn't on my end, and that's why I asked when SD was up, because I wanted to kind of work. It made sense to work backward from there. I'm in the same position. I'll be using this for move to full, but I just got tenure, so that's not in my near future anyways. So I'm more concerned with what SD needs and when in terms of her process. And I mean, the only other thing is making sure that we find a home for it, and that all of this work isn't for naught. And while Cindy and Gail are still involved and have the energy, I don't want to lose that either. But so that's the only other thing. But to me, taking the entire semester and even somewhat into break to put finishing touches on it makes complete sense to me. So let's see if Esty has done her math.
Well, yeah, that does make no that makes sense for me as well. And as far as the timeline for me, this isn't the only book project that I'm working on, admittedly. So I just put out a call for an edited collection, and then also I have another book project I'm working on. That one's a little bit slower. That's a much slower project. So I'm okay, and I'm comfortable where I am with all the different projects that I have going on. And if it means that we move just a little bit slower and we have a really solid intro and chapter and full proposal through December, even through break, however that works out, great. I think that'll be fine.
Okay, so in some ways, this is going back to what Jim had written about in one of his responses there, right? I think at this point, of course, it makes sense to kind of focus on the intro for multiple reasons. A, we just simply have the most material there right now anyways. B, I think it'll help us, get a handle on the book as a whole. I mean, intros are by nature just one of those weird beasts because it's like, how do you get a handle on something that you don't have yet? But yet you need to get a handle on this thing that you don't have yet. So, I mean, we all know that intros, are like that, and it'll be revised and edited and all of that. But it'll give the clearest sort of representation of the book, what the book will look like. And then I guess I'm thinking, yeah, we'll need to make a decision maybe at the end of August in terms of, like, what is the other chapter we're really going to buckle down and focus on. And I feel like by the end of August, we'll have a clearer sense of what material we have that kind of lives where. Does that seem to make sense?
Yeah, that sounds fine. I think that makes some sense. And I guess my very, very tentative initial thinking is it might be the digital humanities chapter is the one that might be able to come together, but that's just very early thinking.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. So if we're slowing things down, does it then make sense to kind of, I guess, not wait for Megan, but to kind of leave her role the same, and she'll come in with research in August, and kind of try to catch up to us at that point. I mean, I do think, I don't want to exactly speak for her. I do think because she is on leave, once she starts to get into it, she will have more time than the rest of us. So I think she'll be able to kind of produce more quickly at that point, whereas we'll be kind of slowing down a little bit. So what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think with this kind of new timeline, it'll really sync up really well with her timeline as well. It'll give her time to get through the moving, which is so stressful, but then also give her a period to kind of get in the place where she needs to be with the research, and then I think it'll kind of sync up really nicely. So, yeah, I full support.
Yeah, I think as long as Megan is comfortable, with that as her role, it certainly is fine with me. I mean, inevitably there will be times I think when each of us is kind of able to really, really concentrate on it, and then times when we're going to have to step back. You probably have as good of a sense as certainly as anyone, Jen, about her sense of, like, what her feeling is about it. But if if she wants to do it, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I think she definitely still, wants to do it. Certainly, I think, listening to that last conversation we had, and it is overwhelming as we discussed, and certainly when I first kind of created this project, and we're in a writing writing group together, and so I had brought this project to the group, and so she hasn't been, actively involved, but she's been looking at this from kind of early on, and certainly my approach was not that, not what we've been doing with the kind of grounded theory and the data collection and all of that. So it seems, if you listen to that conversation we had, it seems very like, what the hell are you guys talking about? But I think, again, I sat down with her and kind of showed her what it looks like, and it became kind of less intimidating. And I honestly, I've worked very closely with Megan a lot, and I think she's really going to kind of like it once she gets into it. But it just seems daunting at first, and it is. Which also then leads me back to sort of continued concerns and kind of questions about methodology, and also some issue that I'm running into with the keywords. And I guess I don't even know how to frame it exactly. Well, let me talk about the issues with keywords first, and see if either of you are kind of running into this. So as I'm working through CNC print, the keywords that I'm getting are like too broad and too kind of obvious, right? So I'm getting computers, I'm getting writing, I'm getting a lot of, online, things like this. And so I'm just starting to feel concerned that this isn't actually telling me anything about the time period that's not like, yeah, we got that part.
Yeah, I want to speak back to this. I actually felt that way too. When I first did the CNC print and I saw the keywords and like one of them was design, and I was like, oh my goodness. But once I started to read once I pulled the 15 articles that I was like, I know I have to read these 15 articles, I could then start to see the nuances, and I could start to connect them to previous pieces that I've read throughout the years. So it became richer than just a keyword of like writing, because I think that is actually one of the keywords that I have is just writing. So when I look at writing, the articles that are things from writing in online spaces, writing fan fiction, writing assessments, writing in blogs. It really covers this interesting span. So the way that I'm now going to move, once I go through and read all these, thematically for me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create all of these categories, and I'm going to list all of the articles that I've read, and I'm going to place my summaries in there. And then I'm going to start to tag those with pieces that I've read throughout the years or that I'm aware of that would kind of cohesively go or have interesting conversations with. And that for me would be able to tell that story or that arc over time. So that's the way I'm kind of like visualizing how that might come together. So yeah, I did have that concern at first, but then once I pulled out the articles, I said, yes, I have to read those. Those kind of, they fell away.
I think for me, what helped from our conversation last time was your discussion, SD, of using the keyword as a way to help you determine what you're going to be reading. So it seemed like less, it's not like the end is not a list of keywords. That's really helping us kind of figure out what are these articles, and then what themes do we see in those articles. But I think at the same time, the fact that those are maintained as keywords actually is worth noting, because it does show a kind of constancy. Like, it would be really, if those weren't the keywords, then that would really be something like, whoa, what's going on with that? So I think the fact that they show up is just, it does reinforce that as a center to things. And while certainly it seems, yes, that's obvious, and may not help you narrow very much, really, but I think it does substantiate that, this remains at the core of what these articles are talking about. And that I think, um, that does show kind of a center. And then, if there are offshoots of that, like the way that those terms are used, that can help determine what to read. That's great. And if not, then you can just bracket it and say, I'm not going to use that as a way to help you determine what to read.
Okay, I guess, yeah, I guess I needed that reminder in a way. I just was starting to feel like, I mean, and this is what I said this last time we talked, that, yeah, I mean, I think the way I designed the chapters, I was hoping those were going to be the keywords. I mean, the sort of themes of the chapters and the keywords, I was obviously hoping were going to kind of meet up in some way. But I started to get a little concerned. But if I think about it as it's more about creating parameters for a reading list, as opposed to, like you're saying, Jim, focusing on the keyword itself, I guess that makes me feel like, okay. I guess what would be really helpful, and I'm like, let's create more work for SD. What would be really helpful, though, and I think this maybe could become kind of one of our first pieces of collaborative writing, and it could go into the intro, is if at some point soonish, when it feels okay for you, SD, if you could start to write up the methodology, and then we could all take a look at that and weigh in on it. I think that would both help ensure that we're kind of creating a consistency across all of our work. I mean, I think it has to go into the intro anyways. So I don't know. How do you feel about that? I don't want to like assign work.
That's like I'm having this moment right now. Oh, that's fun. Yeah, I am. Because I'm really excited. I'm actually really excited about writing that. So this has given me something. This is energizing, because it's fun to write about this because of all of like the messy problems that arise when having to work with this kind of structure. So oh yeah, I will definitely. This is actually a good time for me to start doing it too, because I have to read one more article and then I have to do the Kairos kind of citation and do all the keywords. And I can write at the same time that I'm doing this one. So I'll put this on my docket to start today and moving in through next week.
Bless you. It's fantastic. And I agree that would be really, really helpful. I think both for consistency among the work that we're doing ourselves, but also it just needs to be part of our intro. I also wanted to ask, in terms of the intro, how much space we want to devote to talking back to the original history. And I mean, I feel like that's something that I can contribute to the intro, kind of talking just about what it's doing and kind of some of the moves and things. I don't know how much space you wanted to kind of devote to that. How much you think is necessary, like kind of as not an homage necessarily, but like a little bit of a look back at that text before we launch in?
Yeah, I mean, I think it needs to be a kind of significant chunk of text in the intro. I do think that the pieces that we've all kind of put there already, speak to that. I think there's there's quite a bit of overlap, and this then of course returns to style and voice. We're all kind of saying similar things but slightly differently, and how do we make it not keep saying the same thing and say it in a voice that that makes sense and is coherent. So in some ways, if that kind of interests you, Jim, then I would say maybe go in and start to look at what each of us has kind of put there that already is doing that work. and maybe start to think about some of the things we need to deal with to iron that out. Again, I feel weird assigning tasks here, even though I'm glad Esty found that task, exciting. But that does seem to me, it certainly seems to me the starting place, obviously. I think it's the touchstone that we can kind of always speak back to look at, like, here are the shifts. Here's where that book left off. Here's where we are now. Here's what's happened in between. I mean, that's certainly, how I was going about setting it up. So, I mean, I guess it's kind of a vague answer, but it just seems like, yeah, that's kind of where we started and what's there. So if you kind of start to look at that and see what else we need or where we kind of need to go with that to iron that section out. Anything else on that, Esty, that you think?
I really like that idea of having kind of like acknowledging where the history book was, like here was the book before, because then it transitions into like, here's how this book responds to that but does something different, and then here's our methodology, here are our reasons why that we chose this path, and here's how we did it. So I like that we have that kind of how we look back while looking forward and that kind of rationale.
Does that help, Jim?
Yes, it does. Thank you. And so if that's okay with you guys, then I may go in and do a little bit of that in there.
Definitely. That sounds really good. So one of the things that I had put on the agenda, and this is something that Megan had raised as kind of a concern, is that she wanted like more clear, like a clear research question for each individual chapter. So I was going to kind of go in and try to frame those out for each chapter. But if either of you have ideas for that, certainly put them in there. Once they're in there, I'll let you guys know, and you could go in and kind of do some revisions or some editing, or make changes, suggestions, whatever the case may be. But that's something that I'm going to work on that hopefully will be helpful, again, in guiding us. And I guess this comes back to also my hesitancy about methodology, is I feel a little like, I mean, the way that SD works maybe doesn't always start with a research question necessarily, because you're looking at the data first. I feel like we're doing this weird amalgamation of these research approaches, and I think it's working, but I just kind of constantly want to check in to be sure.
Well, even though like I do like grounded data, I do start off with research questions, but as the data emerges, sometimes those questions shift because the data points to something different. But I do like having the research question because, like, there was in one document in the second chapter, like I highlighted some like key sentences because it was, I was about to start writing in there, and then I thought, oh, I really need to figure out what the frame of this chapter is. Let me highlight this. And so it is helpful for me to be able to go back and to see like some kind of frame, whether it's a frame, whether it's like the paragraph keywords, questions. It does help me to like stay on track with writing. And I also like the idea that we're going to, if we have these questions down, when we write up the full proposal, we'll have those questions to be able to map into that full proposal as well. So, okay, yeah.
Yeah, actually, for the writing that I'm doing, I actually pulled out for each chapter like what I understood them to be. So, I don't know if those will match up with what everyone else does, but that was trying to help me like think, what am I going to put where, as and I mean, it uses a lot of the language that's already in there, but I can certainly just go back and add that into the Google Doc.
Yeah, and if you want to plug what you have in there first, and we can work from that, that's completely fine. That's completely fine too. I'm comfortable either way with that. Okay, I feel like we kind of covered everything that I had here. Did we cover everything that you guys were still thinking about or concerned with?
I just would like to decide on what citation system we're going to use because that's something as I write, I just integrate that into my writing and I generate my citations as I like whether it's the works cited or references as I do the writing. So I would like to kind of come to an agreement what citation system we're going to use for this project.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and I kind of dropped the ball on that because, like I said, I really, really thought I remembered there being a style guide, but apparently there isn't. But um, yeah. So you had thought that, or maybe I should just ask them if they have a, or I could go back and look at some of their other texts.
Yeah, I think I might just confirm with them that they use the same modified style that the Print Journal and CNC Online do. I think that they do, um, but I don't want to say that with 100% certainty. But I would feel comfortable saying that I'm pretty sure that it uses the modified APA that the rest of the CNC publications do, and that we would be safe following that same. So it's basically APA with author names spelled out.
Okay, I mean that's fine, and I can take a peek around this afternoon even and just look at. I mean, I can look at our own the bib that we did for Con Job and look at some of the other texts there. But I think that's fine. That's what you thought as well, SD, right? So anything else that you guys that I didn't cover?
Just to confirm, do we want to set up something in the Google Drive that is kind of our list of terms that we're going to use, shared across, like how are we going to refer to the field, those kind of things? If we just want to have a place where we can, um, list what those are or negotiate what those are.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, do you want to start a Google Doc? I can start one. I think.
Sure, sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think keeping track of, um, in some way, either through comments in that doc or whatever, our own, um, yeah, our own negotiations, I think will be important. Because certainly that's part of that's one of the interview questions I always ask everybody is how do you refer to this field? What do you call it and why? And people call it different things. So, yeah, if you want to start us off and then we can all weigh in, I think that'll be fun. Okay, so I'll just really quickly go back over the list. So for Megan, I'll just let her know, keep things the same, come on in August. We'll post research questions for each chapter. I can put those up, or Jim, if you want to plug in what you already have, and then we can make edits, revisions, agreements, disagreements from there. In each we'll do that in each chapter document that's already there. Estie's going to start writing up methodology, and we'll all weigh in on that. And I think that'll also be very helpful for Megan because I'm explaining it to her, but again, it's not my research style necessarily, but I'm liking it. We're going to strive for a kind of one voice, univocal text with kind of some maybe outtakes or sidebars or links or multimedia elements that show the points at which we diverge. and we're looking at the end of August to kind of decide what chapter in addition to the intro that we'll submit, and we're looking at sometime over the holiday break to submit the actual prospectus. Do I have any of that? No, okay, you're both nodding. Okay. All right. I think if, as long as there's nothing else from you guys, I think we're good to go, and we stuck to almost an hour.
Yeah,
Yep.
thanks, Jen. I think the agenda really helped, like structure things. So that was really, really good. Thank you for that.
No problem. Sorry, it was not the perfect order, but I couldn't figure out what that was. So I'm glad we still got to everything. And yeah, good to see you guys. We'll just continue to check in as we have been, and if we need to meet again, we'll set it up.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah.
All right. See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.